Once you're confronted with a text that you have to analyze, not only do you want to brainstorm, develop some focus questions, and start taking your own notes, but you're obviously going to turn to the internet to do some online research as a starting point. And there are some helpful and risky ways of conducting online research. So we all know there's a whole bunch of fake news out there. So the first thing that we want to do in engaging in online research is to check the validity of the online site. So what this means is that not all sites are created equal. So when you go to the internet and you want to find information about a text that you might be reading, so you might want to get summaries or other people's analysis to start getting your own creative juices flowing. So questions to ask of the site to see whether it's a valid site or whether it's just some person who's posted a bunch of garbage out there and is trying to suck you in. So does it have a published date? So can you identify how old the information is? Can you see if it's relevant? Does it have an author's name? So is somebody willing to own that information? Or is it just some weirdo who's posting stuff out there to try to dupe you? Are there references? So this means, are there references to other sources? So that could be a hyperlink within the text. So there's something that you can click on and it takes you someplace else, and you can start this process all over again, checking the validity of that site. Or maybe it's footnotes. Maybe there are citations to non-online sources, to actual books. Is the site associated with a university or a think tank or even an official government site? So sometimes things like that. So for instance, if you want data, you might go to a formal government statistics repository, or you might go to the UN for some reports. Or there are university sites that gather information and data. So some of those places will offer reputable sources of information, whereas if you can't identify the organization with which the site is associated, you might have questions. For instance, you can look me up. You can look up WISE. You see that this is a legitimate educational organization, and I legit have a bunch of degrees. So hopefully I'm reliable. And so this would pass some of those questions of the site that we might ask with respect to validity. And that gets us to the final, is it a blog? And this is tricky because some blogs are great and some blogs are not. So once again, if it's a blog, you then want to know who's the author of the blog, where is it coming from, and what's its purpose. So those are some of the questions that you ask to check the validity of the site. And then we've got some final tips and, as I mentioned, a risk to avoid. So the final tip is, another way to check the validity of online research is to do something called lateral reading. So lateral reading is, let's say you find an insight on one site, then do some searching to see if you can corroborate that insight on other reputable sites. So read around in more than one place to see if you can find other people saying the same thing, basically. And here's the risk. For sites that can't be verified as having a link to something reliable, then honestly, you might take that as a bit of clickbait and just ignore it and move on and find some reliable sources of information as you start to gather some beginning and preliminary elements of online research in your quest to start to craft your response to a text.